Marian Wright Edelman was a young lawyer when she headed south half a century ago, determined to change the world. Were you breeding young activists?
Absolutely. And this, when you begin to teach people about the importance of reading, and Frederick Douglass talked about the importance of literacy to anything. Once you know how to read, it's very hard to make you a slave. And secondly, once you learn about your history and learn to question rather than just to accept, you create a new child.
Charles Cobb, then a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, had the same thing in mind.
We were going to have upwards of 1,000 young people from the North, mostly white, coming to the state of Mississippi. So we were also faced with the question of, what are you going to do with them?
What they did in the face of threats and violence was create a network of alternative schools, sending the college-age volunteers to teach young people about the value of their own history.
Yes, I want to register to vote. Yes, I want a decent school. Yes, I want to be able to get a Coke if it's a hot day and there's somebody selling Coke in a restaurant. I think it's hard for people to get their heads around that. And the Freedom Schools, in part, were designed to teach young people that they didn't have to accept it.
Edelman, now president of the Children's Defense Fund, never forgot about the 40 Freedom Schools created that long, hot summer. They ultimately served about 2,500 students, including some adults. Flash forward to this year, 50 years later, where for 6 weeks, nearly 13,000 students in 29 states and more than 100 cities have begun each day this way. Harambe, a Swahili word meaning let's pull together. Washington, D.C.'s Malcolm X Elementary is one of nearly 200 Freedom Schools operating this summer in low-income neighborhoods, homeless shelters, juvenile detention centers, and even college campuses. Through field trips, classroom reading, and even singing and dancing, the children are learning more about themselves and about American history. Freedom School teacher Jennifer Snodgrass says the lessons fill in gaps often left unaddressed in traditional classrooms.
It's very much setting the foundation for as they get older, they'll have prior knowledge that they can draw from to help build those facts and their own opinions and thoughts about the civil rights movement.
10-year-old Sydney Dunbar has recently been introduced to the stories of Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela.
I learned that the sacrifices that people had to go through just to be free.
And 8-year-old Anai Holly has been learning about slavery and segregation.
I actually feel upset because it doesn't actually matter about your skin color. It matters about how you are on the inside, not on the outside.
For Charles Cobb, this echoes the effort he launched in Mississippi 50 years ago to address educational inequality.
We used to call it sharecropper education, designed to do nothing more than to keep blacks available as sharecroppers.
But it's not all about the past. It's also about the limitations of the present. Abimbola George is the project director at the Malcolm X Freedom School.
Sometimes when we do home visits, I see no furniture in the living room. Sometimes, I see no door handles on the locks, and it's really hard to see because you realize that if it wasn't for Freedom School, some of these children won't have breakfast or lunch.
Researchers from the University of North Carolina, who studied 19 Freedom Schools in Charlotte last year, found 90% of the students had no summer learning loss in reading. For 2/3 of the students, their reading skills improved. But Edelman wants to build on that preliminary success.
50 years later, why is there still a need for Freedom Schools?
Because we still have an inferior education system for millions of children of color, and particularly if they're poor. Mississippi today, 90% of the children cannot read a computer at grade level in 4th or 8th grade and do math at grade level in 4th or 8th grade. The prisons are teeming, the youth prisons and the adult prisons are teeming with black young men, and the average literacy level of those in those prisons is about a 5th grade. What are you going to do in this economy with a 5th grade literacy level?
How were slaves first introduced in America?
The Children's Defense Fund is planning to honor the legacy of those first freedom schools next summer by expanding to historically black college campuses and to one of the original sites in Mississippi.